I would like to introduce our Brazilian consul, Benoni Belli, which we very endearing call him ambassador, given his many years of successful career in a diplomatic field. So.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. It's very innovative initiative. We are talking about innovation. And this is innovative in the sense that I think it's the first time that we have a meeting that gathers investors from Brazil and investors from the US to talk and exchange, compare notes, exchange information, and help each other to bring to Brazil and Chicago closer together. And this is not trivial, I think. This, as I told you, it's the first time, and it was overdue, I think, because Brazil and Chicago have many things to gain from this cooperation. But I would like to thank, first of all, Flavia and her team for organizing this event, IDL Ventures, the P33, in the person of Brad Henderson, Desiree Vargas, and Evan Shai, Chicago Connectory, and the startups providing Chicagoan beverages and Brazilian food that you have already tasted, I think. And also the speakers of this evening, Daniel Ibri with Mindset Ventures, Tulio Ribeiro, Lanx Capital, Juliano de Oliveira, Brazil Plural Securities, Ricardo Philip, Loop Bar, and the representatives of the Chicago side, Audra Kapochinskas. I don't know if I pronounced correctly. It's from Lithuania, right? So it's not easy for a Brazilian, but I did my best. S2G Ventures, right? Michael Gilks with Cleveland Avenue, Christopher Deutsch, Lofty Ventures, Neil Campbell, Fortunate LLC. And I was just a few words to tell you that I think Brazilians usually look at other markets, like more traditional for Brazil, like New York, Florida, and it's time to work also with Chicago. And the same with Chicago. Chicago, when you think of partners, you think maybe in Latin America with Mexico, which natural, they are here, they have a big community. But Brazil is the leader in innovation in Latin America, in terms of unicorns, in terms of market. So it's only natural that Chicago looks also to Brazil as a partner of choice. And Brazilians, it's time to come here. And also, I would say that we have another thing in common, that it's not so easy to navigate the market. I say people here in Chicago say, oh, it's so easy, we are welcome everyone, but it's not the same. I think Brazilians are already used to work with New York, Florida, and even San Francisco and Los Angeles. Here, you have to make an effort. You have to do network. You have to go see the incubators and the founders, the investors, and make a network here and strengthen this network in order to be successful. So, and it's the same in Brazil. Brazil is not for beginners, as used to say the great Tom Jobim. So you have to make an effort. But once you are there, you see that the opportunities are huge. And the same here in Chicago. So this is the key. If everyone needs to know that in order to make money, you have to also make an effort, right? And it's worth doing this, because both countries have many things to offer for each other. Chicago and Brazil should be together, especially in areas that we are really strong, like ag tech, food and beverage, but also med tech, fintech. Brazil is huge, and many other areas in industries in which we can be competitive worldwide. So thank you so much for being here, and congratulations for you all for participating in this initiative. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Bear with me. This is pretty much the first time I'm speaking about this. It was many years coming. Thank you, Consul Benoni, for the kind words and the immense institutional support that the Brazilian consulate has been providing. So I am Flavia Andrade, the CEO of IDL Ventures. Our purpose is to help internationalize deep technologies to the US, starting with a wonderful city in Chicago. And our fund thesis is aimed to prove that emerging countries, starting from a wonderful country, Brazil, also have incredible deep techs to add to our ecosystem. Although this event was organized rather quickly, because we wanted to be on the same week as the Chicago Venture Summit that was announced not too long ago, if you guys can remember that. It is actually, as I mentioned, a long time coming to put this together. There are definitely no words to describe how thankful I am to, of course, my team. They are the best by far anyone can hope for. And of course, to our partners, P33, especially Evan Shine, Desiree, they're here. Thank you, Desiree, for moderating this panel. And definitely help put this together. And they share the same belief and passion in recognizing the value of closer collaboration between Brazil and Chicago. Definitely to the Chicago Connectory for sponsoring the space and providing the support to make this happen. One of the reasons we chose, especially the primary reason we chose this space, is because Chicago Connectory is also in Curitiba, in Brazil, which a lot of people here in Chicago had no idea of. So we already have a link in Chicago, in Brazil, through Connectory. They are also they're in 5 countries total. Of course, to the panelists, I'm not gonna say anybody's last name so I don't butcher it. So Audra, Neil, Chris, Michael, and Daniel that's online, and I know he can hear me, and especially, of course, Tulio and Ricardo that came from Brazil, and Giuliano that came from Miami. And of course, to the startups, well, let's call it startups from Brazil and Chicago that have provided us with Chicago-based beverages that we want to support, and the Brazilian food that we're pretty proud of. And last but not least, definitely not least, everyone that is here to hear us and to take that first step. So this event marks the kickoff of many exciting and ambitious initiatives that we hope will considerably increase the well-deserving attention to Chicago and Brazil, two outstanding thriving ecosystems, and make a tangible difference in expediting the development and implementation of innovative solutions globally. And it's with great pride and honor that I share with you all this evening some of these initiatives in the making. We understand that there is still a lot to go before we can actually say we've bridged the gap between Brazil and Chicago. So we are starting to organize alliances that will be led by committees and based on sectors. So I already have a few Brazilians that step up in Brazil saying, hey, I wanna help, I wanna be part of this, and here as well. So the intent is to provide a safe space where we can facilitate those exchanges. So that's very exciting for us. Oops, sorry. Here you go. Additionally, we are working with P33. And I don't know if you guys read what we mentioned about P33, but they are, and I know you're gonna definitely present it, and I'm not gonna get in your way, but they intend to turn Chicago into the next global innovation hub, which we intend to help. And so with that, we are working on launching the first global innovation program, which is a Chicago-led initiative that today already involves Brazil, the US, and Germany. And the GACC was supposed to be here, so definitely would like to thank them, and Astrid from the German Embassy, and our wonderful partner here too, Scott Fetters, that introduced us to, from 2112, that introduced us to will be a partner in Ground in Germany. This program involves the innovation ecosystem. So that includes the corporates, the startups, academic institutions. And thank you for University of Chicago to be here, led by a Brazilian. And this is going to be the first one that's going to enable simultaneous proof of concepts to run on all those countries at the same time. And that's going to help us to get improved benchmarking results for common issues constantly brought up in panels, and leading to a faster implementation of solutions worldwide. And solutions that we don't have time to waste, right? So impacting climate change, food shortages, renewable energy, supply chain, and any other, shared major global issues. This first pilot is designed to be for the food and agriculture sector, although we're gonna start branching off after that. And Brazil and the US and Germany are non-powerhouses, right, in this space with extensive influence. The results will already demonstrate relevance in 3 different regions, so North America, South America, and in Europe. We plan to start soon in Chicago, and a year from now in October 2023, already demonstrate those results. And again, we already have partners and corporates very interested in participating. And I'm proud to say that the baseline of this program was created based on benchmarkings from 4 successful nationwide programs that ran in Brazil, including 170 global corporations and 200 startups with 100% successful proof of concepts. So also in an attempt to further lower the entry barriers in the food and ag sector for technology. Connected to this pilot, but on a parallel timeline to prevent bottlenecks, we'll be choosing 1, potentially more, rural areas in Illinois to revamp it as a role model, demonstrating all the positive impact technology implementation can provide in terms of increased productivity and community enhancement. As part of this plan, we have our partner, Luciana Zemet here. She is leading in EB5 investments in the US, and she's going to be working with us to attract foreign direct investments through the program that recently got reinstated to fund a part of this project. And so that's another attempt to bring foreign direct investment to Chicago, Illinois. And that's about it. So if you're interested in being involved or learning more, definitely seek IDL Ventures or P33, and we'll be more than happy to include you in. So Evan, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'll keep this brief. I know everyone's excited to hear from the panel, but I am Evan Shai. I work at P33. I'm the entrepreneur in residence. P33 was started by Penny Pritzker, a nonprofit, really to drive inclusive growth in Chicago's tech sector. Now, what does that mean ultimately? We should have a tech sector, both in terms of startups and talent, that reflects the demographics of this city. And on the founders team, we focus pretty exclusively on how do we help startups, particularly early stage startups, access the capital, networks, and knowledge that they need to be able to be successful through the rest of the funnel. So part of that comes from providing grant capital through our award-winning program called TechRise. We're presenting $25,000 weekly checks to a winning startup, BIPOC and women founders exclusively. And then a number of other programs that are helping roll up our sleeves and coaching these founders to better prepare them to fundraise. But in addition to that, how can we create more connectivity with the assets and people that already exist, both here in Chicago and in ecosystems nationally and abroad? And that's why we want to have conversations like this and hopefully facilitate some of those conversations. So the facilitator of tonight's conversation is my friend, mentor, boss, Desiree Vargas Wrigley, our Chief Innovation Officer at P33.
I have 2 mics, so I think I'm going to just do this one. All right. Yeah. Well, we'd love to welcome the panelists to come and join us on the panel now, and I'll be introduction.
As they're coming up. Oh, come on. So Evan did a great job of talking about the why of this evening, and Flavia, thank you for your partnership in this. We're excited to have you all here. You know, as we think about what it means to be a Chicago contributor to our innovation ecosystem, you know, we don't just see it as companies that are born and bred here. We think about, you know, people who come here for funding, people who come here for innovative ideas that they want to capitalize, people who come here to hire and to network. And so the definition of being an innovation hub, I think, includes an international presence and partnership. And so we're thrilled to talk about what that could look like with you all. So thank you all for being here. And I think I forgot to say my title, I think, but I'm Chief Innovation Officer at P33 and Executive Director of TechRise. But I'm also Costa Rican born, so I'm a two-time Latina founder here. I built a company called Give Forward, which was one of the first crowdfunding platforms, and then a kids activity marketplace, both examples of consumer businesses in a predominantly non-consumer town. We're not really going to be talking about consumer businesses, I think, today. So feel free to chime in if you have any questions that I haven't covered. I would happily add them to the list. But with that, can we get started with your name, your firm or fund, kind of what your areas of focus are?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Chris. Is on? Chris Deutsch. I'm going to give two shout outs first. First is to Antonio Luck. He just texted me that he couldn't physically be here, so he's watching online. And I invested in a Chicago Brazilian immigrant 7 years ago, I think. Company's called Current Mobile. My company is called Lofty Ventures. I am a first check Chicago focused angel investor. I try to invest in Chicago founders as early as possible in their careers and back them in their current company after that through a platform.
Thank you.
Oh yes, and this is one of our awesome founders in the Lofty family. Now she's kicking tons of butt at P33 and great partner. Just quickly, Lofty Ventures is 130 founders included, as well as James, it's in the audience, at 72 companies. Of those 72 companies, about 90% are in Chicago. About 70% are led by underrepresented founders, and we've had 5 exits.
It's great to be here this evening. Mike Gilks. I'm from Cleveland Avenue. We were founded in 2017 by Don Thompson, former CEO of McDonald's, and his wife, Liz Thompson. We focus on food and beverage, and we also launched a technology effort this year in 2022, which is where I'm primarily focused on. Food and bev side, you'll see us everywhere across the value chain, including ag tech as well. I think there's going to be a common theme in ag tech this evening. On the tech side, we have been looking primarily at lifestyle technologies across a few different technology platforms, AI, digital experience, and robotics. Typically, you'll see us in Series A to C rounds. Check sizes range from around 5 to 20 million.
Thank you. Ricardo, one of the Brazilians. I'm been in the past 25 years in the supply chain industry. Started as ABI, InBev distributor in Brazil. And then after that, I expanded to serving several other CPG companies. And so I like to think of myself with 2 hats: as an entrepreneur, building these companies and selling eventually some of them, and as an investor. 10 years ago, as a Harvard Business School alumni, I joined the Brazilian group of Harvard Business School, Angel, and started there, seeing all those incredible pitches, and I had to, improve my eyes and how will I invest in all those brilliant companies. And in the past 10 years, I've been focusing on that. So yeah, that's just startups. Thank you.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm Tulio from Lynx Capital. I'm also part of the Brazilian gang. And we are at Lynx Capital, we are a very diversified investment company. It's mostly our own private capital. And we go from pre-seed, seed, Series A, up to meaningful private equity investors. So our most renowned investments right now. We are the control group of Alpargatas, who makes the Havaianas flip-flops. They sell 1 million pairs per day. So every Brazilian has at least 1 pair every year. and also of Eneva, which is the largest fuel-to-wire gas company in Brazil. And I'm responsible for our venture capital investments, mostly technology. Half of the portfolio is in Brazil, half of the portfolio is here in the US, and mostly deep tech companies. And we have one investment in Chicago, which we are part of the syndicate that is renovating the Chicago Tribune building. But we hope to do more and more investments here. And last time I was here was very inspiring, connecting to the accelerators, all the accelerators here that enabled me to create some programs with the Brazilian University that I can talk later about it. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Audra Kapochinskas, and I've very clearly become friends with all the Brazilians. So I have become an honorary member of the Brazilian gang. Thank you, Flavia. So I work for S2G Ventures. We're a venture fund headquartered here in Chicago. We manage $1.6 billion. We started in 2014 around a thesis focused on a changing consumer. So a consumer wanting to know more about their food, more about where their food comes from, wanting better food, and that driving change across agriculture, across supply chain, across the actual products that are in the store. So under our food and ag umbrella, we have about 60 portfolio companies, and we manage about $1 billion there. Over the last few years, we've really leaned into climate and sustainability. And so we today define ourselves more as a climate platform. So in addition to food and ag, we have sustainable oceans and seafood, clean energy. And then we also launched a fourth fund, which is focused on real assets, because we see that there's a ton of opportunity not just to deploy venture dollars, but to also deploy capital for infrastructure build out, for supply chain solutions, and really think holistically about how to create these markets where there perhaps are none. And so, yeah, really excited to be here. Like many of the folks here, we invest from seed stage. Smallest check is about 500K, but we'll write up to 40 to 50 million. And we're just really excited to engage with a broader ecosystem. Our portfolio is global, and we actively look at, the South American market, Brazil in particular, my friends here, because there's a ton of opportunity in the agricultural space. Brazil is known as a country that is willing to test technology, deploy it, you have scale. And so I think for our portfolio, there's been examples of our portfolio companies going down to Brazil and wanting to do more. We've engaged with family offices and investors in Brazil, but I think there's a lot more opportunity to connect the dots and work more closely. So really excited about what you announced earlier today, Flavia. Yes.
More one for the Brazilian gang. My name is Juliano. I come from the industry. My background is always in the industry and construction companies, cement, and I work for iron ore mines too. So a few years ago, I joined Brazil Plural Securities. I'm head of a private placement. I help companies many Brazilian companies to complement their capital when they arrive here in the US and raise capital to start their operation here. So there is not one thesis. We go from agribusiness to industrial companies, all the companies that we are helping them to start the operation here. That's it.
And then we also have a virtual guest joining us, Daniel Iwuri, right?
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. So thank you for the invitation and also for having me online. It's a pleasure to be here. Really sad I'm not with you in person this time, but I'll be there next for sure. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm one of the founders and managing partner of Mindset Ventures. Mindset is a Brazilian-born VC, so I'm still based in São Paulo. Not sure for how long, but I'm still here. And the team is actually distributed between São Paulo, US, and Israel. So we've been investing mostly in the US and Israeli markets for the past 6-7 years and helping those foreign companies expand to Brazil and Latin America. So we mostly use Brazil as a platform of expansion for our invested companies more than searching the assets here themselves. We have over the years invested in around 60 companies, both in the US and Israel, mostly B2B software, early stage, anywhere from seed to Series B. So glad to be here and thank everyone.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with our Brazilian guest to help inform our audience a little bit more about the market there. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing in the industries that you invest in, but then also maybe what some emerging industries are that are kind of ripe for venture capital.
Well, in our experience, when you ask the Brazilians what they are coming here, why they are coming here, the first answer is very easy. It's the size of the markets. We compare to all the places in the world, it's a big size. The market is, and sometimes they don't know what they are talking about. They talk about the market is this size, but they don't know how they are buying things like that. But even from the agribusiness, even from the tech insights that the guys that we have been, or industrials, they wanted to have a presence here in US. They wanted to explore more the market. They see that here they have more opportunity, even for export, at the base of export from here for other countries. That's our experience.
Great.
Thank you. So I think some interesting trends that we're seeing in Brazil that connect to Chicago is obviously ag and food tech. It's huge, it's growing, and it's starting to happen there. Farmers, they are really willing to try new technologies and to connect to investors, starting to invest also in VC funds. And the industry and the corporate VCs in that particular sector have also been very active, which is something that we do not see in other sectors. So I think it's very powerful. And another one that's starting to appear is media and advertising technology. Chicago is a powerhouse of that, and we're starting to see that's one of the things that Brazil is really good at, is creativity. Advertising agency market is huge, media buying is huge, and we are starting to see new companies being created there about it. And I think there's great opportunities to connect to companies here also and exchange experiences.
Adding to that, there is one area that I like very much. That is the fintechs, because we have to have in mind that 50% of Brazilian economy still runs in cash. So that's a lot of opportunity to put that cash in plastic or make it electronic. It's mind blowing that an economy of that size still runs that much in cash. So there are there are investors, new banks, but there's still a lot of opportunities to grow in fintech.
Okay. Daniel, anything to add?
Oh.
I think they were pretty comprehensive. I think there are so many good opportunities also in exchanging talent, right? I think we see this lack of talent worldwide, and I think being able to foster and connect what's happening in the US or Illinois, Chicago, whatever, to Brazil, I think there's a huge opportunity there to exchange talent even more now that the world is completely distributed and remote. So I think we can definitely look for those bridges.
Thank you. And now going to our Chicagoans, we've talked a lot, or not a lot, but we started to touch on ag tech and how it touches climate tech. Supply chain is also a very big category for us here. Industrial manufacturing is traditionally strong here. There's a kind of a new chapter of manufacturing happening. What should our visitors know about what some of the emerging massive market opportunities that kind of we have a differentiated right to win here in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I feel like I think we serve as a regional hub for a lot of amazing innovation and incumbent businesses that have been here for decades. And there's a lot of deep domain expertise here that we can learn from and leverage from, and talent that we can learn from. And so it just feels like there's a huge opportunity to just kind of look at, I mean, particularly in the agricultural and supply chain context, I think we're particularly strong there. Just leaning in and leveraging that. And really also, I think from a cultural perspective, I think Chicago and the Midwest You know, our valuations are more reasonable, our people are more practical. I'm totally generalizing here, but I do think that that's attractive from you know, when you're executing and you're in these hard industries where it's not just, you know, you code something and you flip it and it's ready to turn on and like generate $1 billion in revenue. I think we're really good at hard industries, and we have people here who have the tenacity to be able to build up those businesses and scale them and launch them. I feel like I'd love to hear your perspective because you're just in this more deeply than we are in Chicago. But yeah, I think it's just between the culture and the domain expertise that exists here, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
I'm going to have Michael go next and then Chris, if that's.
Yeah, I think you made some great points. Might have done a little bit of research before I came tonight, but I think we have 36 Fortune 500 companies in Illinois, which is a huge amount. I think it's the 4th largest in the US. So I think as you look at not only Chicago, but broader Illinois, it's a hub for a lot of things. Traditionally manufacturing, we do food and beverage very well. But I think what's becoming more interesting about Chicago is it is becoming more of a hub for innovation. And I think that has been enabled by bringing more capital to Illinois and Chicago. I think you're seeing more funds being raised. You're seeing larger funds being raised, and you're seeing a lot of funds being deployed here as well. I think in 2016, 2017, there were around $5 billion that went into startups in Chicago. And in 21 was a big year for a lot of numbers, but it was especially big for this one. I think it was around 17 billion. So I think as we attract more talent, more innovation, more capital, we're going to see more industries have a reason for being here as well. I do a lot of tech at the Cleveland Avenue side, and we're trying to keep a very wide aperture, even though we're in Chicago. But what we're trying to do is get the best of all worlds. So not only the West Coast, but the East Coast, what's homegrown in Chicago and internationally as well. I think we have 6 or 7 investments out of the tech fund, and 3 of those are international. So I think in Chicago, not only are we looking here, but we're looking to take the people that we partner with abroad on that journey as well.
I can think of at least one of the companies that we've co-invested on. I was actually not quite first check, but in the first round of a company called Retail Aware. And I'm sure they have a lot of success in the retail environment down in Brazil as well. But did you want me to speak a little bit more? Okay, so I see a very different perspective at the first check level. I'm literally investing in founders in a lot of cases where they don't even have a product yet. And that's a very different kind of animal than when they typically get to raising a traditional institutional round. The founders in Chicago are just different. There is something in the water. Maybe it's our winners. Not actually joking. I think there's a lot of grit involved. If you can handle our winners, that actually says something. And it's one of the litmus tests I actually go by, and what's helped me create Chicago as my investment thesis. Because we have such awesome diversity of our industry, not only does that give us the ability for founders to have ideas that are all over the place, and as a result, I'm agnostic. I've invested in stuff I never in a million years thought I would invest in. I'll give one quick example. Actually, there were 2 things. I said, I'll do anything in Chicago, but carve out for Fintech and carve out for MedTech, Biotech. I ended up being on the board of a Fintech company and that I invested in. And I invested in a company that's 3D printing bone material and now ovaries, which just became, I could just start talking about. So the variety of amazing industry from our background has spawned all of these founders that have found problems in those industries and are trying to solve them. And so not only is our more traditional sort of old line business very diversified, but so are our startups as a result of that, because they're being born out of their previous jobs and the experience in Chicago. It also gives a great opportunity for these companies to incubate, to sell to get investment from strategic companies in the local Chicago ecosystem. So there's a lot of reasons why I'm bullish on Chicago and Chicago founders specifically, but we also have a very high hit rate. A lot of these founders are able to do a lot with very little and end up having doubles, triples, and home runs. And now we're starting to also see over time, because we're also getting more big investment in Chicago, some of these unicorns that are coming out, like the Kins and the Cameos and the what have you. So.
Well, I hope that the future is that we do more with a lot more access to capital. That's why you're here. So I'm going to add a couple of opportunities that we're also seeing at P33. So one, of course, is around Web3 and what that means for fintech. And given the history of trading in our city, we actually have incredible access to developers, talent, and something like 70% of crypto trading happens through Chicago in some way. So I will say that's a category to pay attention to here. And then another thing to note is just actually the pretty massive capital gap that we have between the demand and the supply. So even though we had our best year yet, record year, last year with 12 minted unicorns and 7 or 17 billion, I can't remember which one it is.
And that was for the Midwest.
Okay. Okay.
I said it and I was like,
I think it sounds so bad. Talk about the stage that we spend a lot of time in, which is the pre-seed and seed, where there are the biggest opportunities for wealth creation for your firms and for our founders. The gap is actually about $250 million a year that we are exporting to investors not in Chicago, which means our founders here are ripe for new types of creative investment. And so, having that knowledge, how do you think we can better connect our founders with funders like you all and your friends? You can bring more friends on stage next time.
I can maybe begin with that.
Great.
I got to know Chicago just last year during the Chicago Venture Summit. And I invested right away. Yeah, through IDL. Yeah, because I knew the coasts a lot. But when I came to Chicago, it, mind blowed me with all these opportunities and all this ecosystem that is being developed here. And when we talk about specific industries, it's true, but I know a lot about a supply chain. And I got really impressed with all the things that being developed here in terms of supply chain companies or that serve the supply chain. So, I think the answer to your question is you need to bring more people like myself and just show them around, because it's really impressive, the things that I've been, I'm coming every year now,
We'll just invite you from May to October. And then
Yeah, I think it's all about connecting people and remembering about them. So nurturing the relationships. And as I said, I came here also last year and was very impacted by what I saw here. We have investments where I am at the board in San Diego, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in New York, in Atlanta. And when I came here and saw this ecosystems where all the stakeholders are part of it, so the industry, the accelerators, the universities, and lots of entrepreneurs with great ideas, I was certain that Christopher, you need to call me when there is the next round in your company to say, because we are very eager to be a part of this ecosystem also. And again, it's more about nurturing the relationship, because sometimes we simply forget, oh, we have this crazy Brazilian there that's actually leading rounds in the United States. So the burden is on us, I think, sometimes from Brazil to knock at the doors. But I have seen this happening in other cities, and I'm sure it can happen here also.
Daniel, do you want to add anything?
I think Ricardo's and Tulio's points are very good, right? We being abroad, like if I weren't like on this, VC word, I would say that Chicago was never my top of mind. Where everybody, outside the US is talking about like Silicon Valley, New York, and etc. And they just forget that there's so many good hubs and ecosystems and talent out there, right? And my experience was similar to theirs. So Flavia, I've been helping Flavia for a long time, and she was insisting, you need to come. And after COVID, I had no excuse anymore. So I went last year with Tulio, and I was there like completely, I think pissed off myself that I never went before and I never explored it further. So we ended up investing in a Chicago company and are very much willing to do more. So it's very impressive what you have there. And I think it should be more visible to the eyes of the world. And I think we can definitely work more in partnerships and do more things together. So, and taking to the other comments, which I think is interesting, if you go just like to the let's say, typical hubs of like New York or, you know, California, etc., it's so much harder, right? Because it's more expensive, it's more competitive. It's like everybody's fighting for the same market, the same talent. Just like my colleague said, valuations are crazier, right? So I think Chicago appeared to me much more friendly and open and easier, especially for international companies that are going through this phase of going abroad. I think this could be a great starting point for them.
Juliana, do you have anything on?
I have a few comments. That's it's the same. That's in my case, for example, I give an example that I was working for a poultry company that they are looking for to buy a new company here or to invest here in US. Chicago never come to our mind. There's you need to communicate more. There's networking, communication, show opportunities. That's the guys. They are the guys who come.
I have two related questions. One is that in the US, we have kind of this unfortunate history that to have a deal happen, you have to have a warm introduction, someone that knows you make the introduction. Is that the same in Brazil? Do we need to have a warm introduction, or do you welcome founders to reach out to you directly?
Brazil is complicated. It's very difficult. Warm introduction helps a lot. And looks for the right partners helps a lot too. So to start a business in Brazil, you need to take a lot of, because of regulations, labors, taxes. It's very difficult.
Yes. And if our founders want to come to you for capital, can they come directly, or do they still need the warm introduction?
No, they can.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, in our case, we like to listen to cold intros, and actually some of our best investments, I entered the room very skeptical. I think, well, it doesn't work, but let me listen to the person and perhaps give me an advice, make another introduction while it's trying. I have this utopia that venture capital could go back a few decades and be like collaborative like it was in the beginning. Now everybody wants to take the whole round for themselves. And some of the best investments, I left the room, said I was completely blown away because they had a perspective in the world that I didn't have the full picture. So we are open to those cases, and we'll do the analysis and the painful work and ask a lot of questions. But innovation can come from anywhere. It can be a really hard deep tech problem that a lab must be involved with the best scientists, but sometimes it's just a street hustler with a good idea, and then you can put together a coder, and we like actually to unlock some things. We have the connections, yeah. Right? I think that's our role. So perhaps this founder doesn't have the right connections, but we see, well, if we bring our own connections to this founder, what can it be unlocked, given that he's such a hustler, such good ideas, and etc.
Yeah, I love founders who reach out on cold calls, because that shows in the first place that, you know, they are not afraid of just reaching out, and that as could call some guys found it crazy. I like that kind of energy. And I'm currently one of the things, the business that I'm analyzing was a cold call, and I said, come on, guys, this thesis is absurd. I'm not going into it, but and then obviously I needed to, you know, reach out to friends who could, you know, talk about them. You need to make your homework as an investor. But yeah, cold calls are great sometimes, and eventually it shows a lot about the perspective of the kind of mind that the investor, the
yeah.
founder has. Yeah.
The grit, yes. Daniel, anything to add, or?
No, good.
Okay. Now this is more for Audra and for Michael, but as you guys look at foreign investments, do you go into those markets with a co-investor in mind, or do you help facilitate those introductions? And what can local Chicago VCs be doing to kind of do a better job of that?
So far, just thinking about what we've done internationally on my end, A couple weeks ago, we completed a deal in Israel that was in the semiconductor space. Working on something in Korea right now, and we had another deal out of New Zealand. And a lot of times, these deals are coming to us from warm introductions. So we have a partner in the ecosystem, which I think we're all doing our best to bulk up and build. So we're seeing as much as we can that fits within our thesis in the areas that we're looking to invest. But I think as we look at life going forward and we think about where we're going to go next, what we want to do is make sure that we're getting with the right market first, making sure that product market fit is there, and then finding the right founder, the right fit for Cleveland Avenue and that founder to have, some great growth and development going forth. And I don't think that's going to be exclusive to just Chicago, although we're going to find a lot of good stuff in Chicago. Or the US. I think we're going to go broadly and see where the best place is to find these partnerships and park some capital.
So I think for us, very similar to Cleveland Avenue, for us going into certain markets is it's tough if you don't have a network. So, Asia, for instance, we probably wouldn't do a deal unless we had a syndicate partner that we had a really deep relationship with, that we trusted, that could help us with diligence, that could help sit on a board, that could just provide a little bit more of the operational support. We're also very active investors. And so we very rarely will just throw in a check and say, good luck. And so there's also an element of, I remember we made an investment in a company in Scotland, and there was an active debate across all of our managing directors because they were like, who's going to Scotland? How much time are you willing to spend in Scotland? And we ended up doing the deal and we're really excited about the company, but that was something that was brought up a lot. And so, Brazil, we have met with Rizoma, we've met with a handful of others. And I think there we want to do more, but having a network that can give us a little bit more assurance would be really helpful. And someone who's there who, there's also this ecosystem of, so we do a lot in terms of company support on the platform side. So we spend a lot of time building relationships with corporates and other investors so that we could support our portfolio companies as they go to market and generate sales and revenue. And that piece is missing when you go into a new geography. And so for us, we actively, join networks of folks. So we're part of a group called CREO, that's a network of family offices globally. And we'll work with them to understand where there's opportunities, and then work with them to understand where there might be connection points into operating companies that can support on the revenue generation side. So it's not just we don't have a network to source these businesses. We could source them. It's a question of how do you resource it after you invest, and how do you really facilitate their growth and de-risk the investment.
And then, so I guess this next question is for everyone, because you're all seed or later investors, but a lot of activities happening now at the pre-seed level. And so that requires building relationships with funds like Lofty and the work that who's doing a lot in Chicago. So what, if anything, can we as pre-seed investors do to make it easier for you to see our deals? Do you want us to do distribution emails? How do you want to shop our deals?
Just make the intro. Yeah, and we and then we move forward to analyze the company, see if we can be helpful, because as you said, we're also very active investors and we like to get our hands dirty, but it needs to be valuable to the company. So yes, just make the deals come and we do the rest.
Keep inviting you to summits. So, no, please go ahead. Well, I know that part of the thesis for IDL is around tech transfer and bringing technologies to U.S. universities to then be able to better bring them to market in a scaled international way. And so I'm curious, is that part of the work that you all do within your individual funds and efforts? And if so, can you explain a little bit more to the audience maybe about how that works in Brazil and when you bring it here?
So in Brazil, we do not have the ecosystem is not as developed as here. So a great example of a very interesting deep tech company that's Flávia is also helping They developed a promising technology for colon cancer, and they did all the research inside the university and then animal trials. But to move to human trials, you need to actually to make human grade active ingredients in a human certified lab, third party one. And we simply do not have that in Brazil. So some types of deep technology companies you simply can't move forward from the university to the next stages because we do not have the ecosystem. So such a company in San Diego, I know that they could walk 100 meters and find a company that do that, and another 100 meters that would be also helpful. So this kind of ecosystem for especially deep tech startups is lacking. And as I mentioned, when I came here last time, I was really impressed about this connection of all the stakeholders. It really inspired me, and I saw that this connection between universities and the ecosystem was not being built. They were very much focused on their own internal research and not doing the next steps for the entrepreneurs and the great ideas there. And I started knocking at universities in some way to say, hey, let's do something like Chicago. And the main public universities basically said, we'd love that, you'll simply not work in public university. And coincidentally, the best computer science department in Brazil, from a private university in Brazil, non-profit, but private university in Brazil, sent me a LinkedIn message. It was not code. I knew it was a math professor that I had chats 20 years ago. And he sent me this message, hey, Tulio, we are making this great new technology here. We don't know how to commercialize. We don't know the opportunities. And you are the only venture guy that I know. Can you imagine in any university in the United States, a professor say, you are the only venture capital guy that I know, especially in the best computer science university in Brazil. So now I spent 6 months talking to them, and I created, I think the best way to help them is the theme for me is sensibility. So have the sensibility of some key people to see what's being developed there at this university, at this computer science department, and connect to the problems of the world. So I brought some people that has a broader visibility of the world and that can understand some bits of technology. So like the CEO of Adobe for Latin America, the CEO of CNN for Latin America, and other people in the business to start connecting the university. And perhaps they can enable connections here with the Chicago ecosystem, because all of those things right now are stuck in students' minds and they simply do not have the reference on how to unlock it. So they are extremely glad that I'm creating this, but this only happened because I made this trip to Chicago last year.
Thank you. That was an excellent example. And hopefully you all know that we have Duality here, a quantum accelerator. I think it's the first and most well-funded in the nation. So as you talk to more, okay, great. Well, as you talk to more of your companies or your researchers, send them our way, because we will happily commercialize with you. I would love to see if the audience has any questions before I go. Yes, it was. It's true. The Nobel Prize in Physics was connected to quantum. Thank you. So hopefully we can claim some of that, even though none of the researchers from Chicago are connected. The fact that we have so much funding and now and energy, I think, from our venture market around it. So there will be emerging industries, I think. One of them in particular, of course, we talked about a little bit, is climate tech, but given the ecology of Brazil, and I think the advancements that we're making here in the US and some of our from carbon sequestration to some of our other efforts, it feels like that's a natural partnership between our cities and your country. And so I'm curious, beyond kind of the ag tech side of it, what you all of you, I guess, see as industries or categories within climate tech that we can better collaborate on to kind of, I'm going to go with something like, end us on a note of changing the world together. So how can we change the climate together?
Yeah, I mean, we were literally talking about this before this panel. So it's it's a good tee up. Thank you. So, I mean, in the ag tech space, we see just tactically, there's a huge opportunity to engage with Brazil, because you have the opportunity to trial in the US and then on the off season, go to Brazil. And so you get just a lot more reps by being able to manage both hemispheres. I I think on the carbon side, like that market is super new. We're still doing a lot to try to understand the soil microbiome, to understand permanence as it relates to carbon sequestration. We're thinking a lot about agroforestry, how you pair that with different types of crops, how you use genetics to sequester more, and to really think differently about where there might be opportunity to add more sustainability, and also for us to be able to produce sufficient food given the climate variability that exists. So increasing droughts, increasing wetness in certain areas, there's just going to be, it's going to be a lot harder to do what we've been doing. But I think, you know, in Brazil and in the US, I think there's just a ton of opportunity to leverage these new technologies. In the US, the USDA announced $20 billion of grants last week that are dedicated to smart climate agriculture. And so I think for Brazilian technology companies, there's a huge opportunity to come here and implement some of their technologies, because there is budget now that has suddenly been created for a lot of the large corporates to actually test these technologies. And I think for US-based businesses, there's just, again, like the climate in Brazil is much more open to technology than it has historically been in the US. And so given the scale of operations there and the sophistication, I think there's just an openness to trial more.
We talked about that before.
So I second to that, and this counter season is, I think it's very powerful. We had an investment in Argentina. It did well, don't need to worry, but it was actually counter season seeds that were sent here to the Midwest for early crops. And in Brazil, as I said before, I think that's the only part of the technology and venture ecosystem where the industry and the corporate VCs are very, very active. And most of those corporate VCs actually, their headquarters are here in the United States, and some are here in Chicago. So I think this connection is very powerful. And funding also. So an example, we have this initiative in Brazil where we'll buy like 2 million acres of degraded land, and we will restore it to rainforest. It's not something that fits in a fund. It's not like pinus or eucalyptus that you can grow in 5 years in Brazil. It takes 40 years. So you need like a specialized type of capital that lasts that long, and that land, and we raised 400 million, but to buy all that land, you need like lots of billions, and these land will be returned back to society. Because if you restore them to tropical forest, what will you do with that? Like we just say, no, you can't cut the trees anymore. And that will require lots of capital to be able to continue doing that.
One other opportunity is, we were also talking about it, 25% of, in clean energy, 25% of the fuels that our car runs in Brazil are mixed with ethanol. So we already have, very clean energy base in our cars, and also in diesel for the truck. So there's a lot of technology in that we could share. We know the efforts on the US side also on that. So maybe there's a lot on that. It's agriculture, technology, and a bit of real estate mixed on those things.
I think we're starting to wind down. So I was thinking of I'm just making up off the script entirely. So speed round question. I might start with you, Daniel, to be prepared. What is like one business, if you could find it tomorrow, you'd be excited to fund? Like what's a category or a problem that you're looking for the right company right now?
I think I was gonna say climate, but I would sound not very creative at all. But I think climate tech is really exciting these days, and we are looking a lot. Just to give a compliment to that, not to be so stupid, but we are looking a lot into like Web3 deals in the in the decentralized sense of the word, not on the hype crypto stuff, but on the decentralized meaning of the word, right? And if we can find solutions in the ag/food/climate, sustainability, whatever, that can benefit from this new tokenomics, I think this is really, really powerful. So I think one of the things that we should be mindful about the environment is that for most people, and that's very true for Brazil, we still lack the necessary incentives to, care about the right things. And I think, the tokenomics can make a huge impact on that. So I'll be very interested to see, Web3 related climate/agro projects.
I think for not so only for Brazil, for the world nowadays, I think the solution is how to speed up the process, the change. We are talking about that. Yesterday, as I was watching CNBC, there is a person from Goldman Sachs comment that in the last 10 years, the world invests $3.8 trillion in renewables and only change 1%. So this, how to speed up this process of change to move from fossil fuels to a renewable energy. I think this will be the challenge for this new decade now. This is how to speed up that. Because if we continue at the same pace, it's not true what the people are telling the news for us. It's not going to happen. I wrote an article probably 1 year ago after the COP meeting to say it's not true. It's not going to happen because, see, how much is come from the fossil fuel for this country, for the energy? 60, 70%, 75% of the energy from India come from coal. More than 70% from fossil fuel from China. So this is how to speed up. Probably we're just talking about, fortunately, we're talking about the subject. 85% from energy from Brazil come from renewables. 85% from renewables, from hydro, from sugarcane, ethanol, biodiesel, things like that. So this is how we speed up this process. This is a problem that I think we should solve in the near future.
We talk about it as the decisive decade.
Yes.
Like if we don't do it in the next 10 years, we're screwed. So like you either do it now, you invest a ton of money now, or like we'll be in like a whole different set of circumstances and dealing with a whole lot of black swans in 10 years. The other thing, so we do a ton in climate and like there's a bunch of stuff there, but the other thing that we talk a lot about is the convergence of food and health. And we didn't really touch on it in this panel, but I think that's another area where there's a ton of expertise in this region, and just like better understanding some of the modes of action in our healthcare system and better understanding the linkages between the food that we're consuming and the chronic diseases that we have as a country, and really kind of getting our heads wrapped around, how healthcare could potentially bankrupt entire countries if we don't get a handle on it. And given some of the subsidies that exist in our food system, there's just a huge disconnect. So I don't know what the exact startup would be, but something around better connecting nutrition and health outcomes for the population with planetary health and overall outcomes.
Okay, we are talking about having a magic lamp and, definitely on education, because with education we can better lives of everybody. And but on a specific point, people are asking me about the elections in Brazil that happened last Sunday, and the thing is, we are a divided country as everywhere in the world. It's not specific from Brazil, and maybe it's a lot to do with education, information, how people read the news, how people collaborate, and I think there's a lot to do on that, and I don't know, it's a magic lamp thing, but I would like to see a solution for that.
On our side, and this goes back to ag tech. So we made an ag tech investment from our tech fund a bit ago, and it's a modular robot that goes out into the field and it autonomously picks weeds. And by doing that mechanically, it is able to ultimately sequester carbon because it doesn't require any tilling of the land or any herbicides as well. So down the road, what looks like right now a reason for being on the farm could unlock, this monetization of carbon and carbon credits. And I think if there was a way, and maybe there is, and I just haven't seen it yet, but if there is a way to monitor, measure, and add credibility to the carbon that's sequestered, that would be huge, because we've all invested in so many different businesses that are focused on storing carbon, keeping it in the ground, keeping it in the trees, but how do you measure it and how do you monetize it? And if we could do that, it'd be a huge solution for some of the problems that we're seeing in that decade that you're talking about, and also a pretty interesting economic equation for a lot of folks.
You don't have to stay in climate tech. You can go any problem.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to go into climate tech for a very different reason. I'm quite the opposite of this group. I actually happen to be very ADHD, which makes my job very fun because I see so many different founders in Chicago pitching so many different crazy things that I never would even imagine existed. 3D printing bone material is a pretty good example. But Desi and I were actually on a panel last Thursday together, something like that, last week. And immediately after our panel at the Generator, which is a new accelerator program in Chicago, specifically around climate tech, environmental related companies. And a company that I invested in actually went through it, and the founder was on the panel. And I love the way she describes it. She created a kind of fungi that actually she trains mushrooms to eat trash, is basically how she describes it. And their initial entry point into the market is when you re-roof a home, all those crappy, nasty, very toxic shingles go into landfill. They train their mycelium to actually eat those shingles, and then they create that into a usable product. So she's solving a very big problem in the waste stream world that is diverting all of this horrible CO2 that's coming out of landfills, et cetera, and actually being able to monetize the front end and the back end with having a usable product that's going to make the world better. So I actually don't look for, I look for great founders. It's their job to get me excited about the thing that they're excited about. So I take a very different approach in that way. And from as a crazy ADHD guy in Chicago, that's why I have so much fun every day.
Well, I'll close because I do have an angel group. And one of the things that I'm excited about is the use of AI and crowdsourcing knowledge that we haven't had before, especially around women's health. So can we change the way we do clinical trials, kind of decentralize it and put it back in the hands of doctors? So that's what I would fund right now. Okay.
Can I ask a question? I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Please, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for my colleague, Chicago investors. So we're talking about internationalization of potentially of Brazilian startups to the US through Chicago, right? I think, you mentioned that, investing in Brazilian startups, it's for you guys being in the US, it's quite challenging. You need local knowledge, you need local connections, you need, usually you need someone here leading or someone on the board who can, follow up with the company, etc. What would it take for a Brazilian company that is willing to move to Chicago or to enter the US through Chicago to get funding from you guys? Is it about, having the team on the ground, having the founders relocate, having the company legally, incorporated in the US, or having, revenues and traction in the US? So what would it take for it to be kind of a US company and get you comfortable in investing in them?
It's a really, really interesting and good question. I think some of the points you hit on are really good. I think having a little bit of traction here in the States, so we can see how that business begins to transfer across borders. And something, I was actually going to ask you guys about this as well, but I think corporate partnership could look really interesting for attracting U.S. capital as well. So if it was on, the food and beverage side, just to make it really easy, because we've got a lot of food and bev in Chicago. So if it was, something where one of these larger organizations got behind and said, this is something that we can use and we can push through our distribution channels. I think that starts to look really interesting for US investors to, one, get comfortable with the product and the distribution and the portability of whatever that may be, product or technology into the US. I think those two factors, having a little bit of penetration here and some good partnerships around the table, would look really interesting for us. And also having a founder that can identify what the right partner looks like in the US. So if there was a warm introduction or a cold call to our earlier conversation, hey, Cleveland Avenue, we see this synergy between us and between you. We of course have a McDonald's connection, a food service connection. So if there was something that made a lot of sense, or like a 1 + 1 = 3 based on our reach and our network, that would also be really, really helpful.
I think you covered it. Okay. I'll give a sorry. So as I mentioned initially, I am very Chicago focused. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be personally making investments in Brazil. I did note I have a Brazilian American immigrant that I invested in several years ago. But what I'm happy to do, and this goes for anybody on the panel, anybody in the audience, anybody online, I co-invest with several hundred other American investors, from angel all the way through to several levels up in investment rounds. And I'm happy to make introductions to those other investors. They're always looking for great opportunities. Some are geo-focused in maybe the States or North America, whatever. But I'm certainly happy to try to help socialize some of that. And I also am very happy to make introductions for anybody that's interested in making investments in Chicago to Chicago founders. So unfortunately, I can't directly help you with investing in your market, but I can certainly help get other investors that I know that might be interested in exploring that. And then obviously I can be a great tour guide for early stage Chicago startups that you're looking to back.
We are doing our first investment in an India-based company, but they do have Delaware C Corp status, which makes it much easier for us to facilitate the transaction. So I think having a presence here, an entity here, removes a lot of barriers, especially for early stage capital. Any other questions from the audience?
I guess before we go on this topic, I'd put the question back on the Brazil side too. And I think one thing that's interesting for us is the Brazilian market, because I think there's certain businesses that we're in or that we see that could do very well in Brazil. So I'd say less about attracting investment immediately, but how do we help our companies penetrate your markets? What's the best path to, we've been successful in the US, we see an opportunity in Brazil, how do we get there and act on it?
I guess it starts with connections like this one, right? I just visited Israel, and there is this tech company there in ag tech that is now huge in Brazil, serving companies there. But it started, with some connections, and then they were introduced there. They had this great technology, impressive technology, but it had to, be introduced. So I guess this is the first thing. I wouldn't say above all, but very important one. So when events like this happen, when people come to Chicago, when you come to Brazil, connections are starting, and so I think that's important.
No, let David ask the question too.
Did you have another comment? I don't know.
No, I would just compliment that it's boots on the ground in a meaningful way, and recognize that Brazil is a very, very unequal country. So you have Belgium with high GDP per capita, and a great chunk that is not as well served. And there are opportunities to help improve those lives also with technology and products. But it's two very different countries that if you just look at the big numbers, might mislead into where we should go.
That's the main problem. It's just if you see only the numbers, it's a misleading. I have been working in the last 15 years doing that, helping foreign companies invest in Brazil too. So that's you need to find the right partner and a warm introduction, because without that we are not going to succeed.
Hi, my name is David Dalka. I grew up in Chicago. I spent 5 years in New York City. During that time, I worked at BlackRock during the time it went from 80 to 800 people. Today, it's an S&P 500 company. Silicon Valley builds companies that are that way too. When I look at my time at BlackRock, one of the things that made it special was that it has age diversity. I'm curious, since Chicago lacks age diversity in all of its startups, how does Brazil's startup scene look at that issue? What do you look at that? And then the second part of that question is, do you replace technical founders with actual business leaders so you can create scaled startups?
You want to add women into that diversity question?
That conversation already exists.
Talent is a big issue in Brazil, for sure. And generally, when startups are built like a group of friends from school or from work, etc. So from the beginning, unfortunately, is hard to get that diversity. But it's also hard for I think Brazilian entrepreneurs lack perspective on the broader problems of the world. So our role is like to bring other key people to their like top management layer. And there's a big lack in the management layer. So there are great guys perhaps in product or in design, but on the management layer for startups, there's a big lack of talent, and bringing that talent with the right perspective. And to have the right perspective, you need diversity. Of course, that's what we do the most in early stage startups.
I have a particular case, maybe in age diversity. I was curious about aging in general. And then I found these 2 plus 60 founders who founded a company that were designing like Facebook for people who wanted to live together, a co-living space. And so I guess they are exception. I'm not generalizing it, but we have some founders, in that it's important, as Tulio was saying, mix experience with the energy.
How about the gentleman video?
Daniel?
Yeah, I think the startup ecosystem in general needs more diversity, right? And I see that, as investing in the US and also investing in Israel and being in Brazil, I think not any of them are diverse enough. So either in age, gender and whatever. So I think we need more inclusion in the venture industry in general, and also on the entrepreneurial side. So I think we need to foster that. And Brazil is not different. Like just like Tulio mentioned, we are very, unequal country. So we have very different types of population and, per capita, GDP, etc. if you go across the country. And that, enhances even more the lack of diversity, I would say. So if you are like a, white guy that, come from a good family, went to the good schools, studied abroad, you can have a more successful startup or more chance of raising money from the good investors, which leads us to this cycle of not having inclusion as needed in the industry. So I'd say we should, aim for that more.
I know it's something that Chicago Innovation is focused on. We have a program, an accelerator for people over 60 to build startups and to support the ones that have been built. So something that, along with TechRise, that we're all focused on trying to bring more equity, I think, and in the US, we do have a bit of a head start, I think, because there's so much programming, but we would happily share it with our friends and other ecosystems. So hopefully we can bring that to you all too.
There's a great, so one of the things we do with Lofty Ventures is try to help our founders engage, learn how to be angel investors earlier while they're still founders, engage with local nonprofits. We created a program called Invest It Forward that we're going to open source here in the next year or so, which enables our founders to get involved with nonprofits. Well, one of them that we've been involved with is called Chicago Innovation Foundation. For people in Chicago, they know that by the Chicago Innovation Awards. I think Desi's probably won a dozen of those, a couple, two. And they do a bunch of different mentoring models. They created the ladder for I think mostly BIPOC founders or BIPOC individuals in Chicago, all stuff around like kind of innovation community. They created one specifically called Ageless Innovators. And I actually participated in this. It was a mentorship program where people from different age brackets were paired together and be mentored. And I think that was actually a really helpful program. It's the first of the kind that I've seen. I think that would go a long way in what you're talking about.
Yeah, we just worked with them on a TechRise pitch competition. So yes. Wait, one more question?
Yes. I don't think any. Yeah, okay. I would like to know how makes you decide to invest in that company? How do you get there? What makes you decide to invest in some company?
Like, what do they look for when they're making the investment? What's the final yes? Yeah. Okay, this is going to be another speed round question. Okay, speed round. You cannot say grit. Okay, so I'm going to remove that one.
The founder.
Okay, and you can't repeat the answer.
The size of the opportunity, the size of the market.
So many different reasons, but yeah, the founder is important. It's a joke, you know. But talking about a little bit more on that, I can decide in a month, or in the case of Co-Live that I just described, it took me 3 or 4 years, you know, following them and their vision to see if it really would work. And then I decided to invest. So it was a long investment process.
I'm going to say product market fit. I think you can have phenomenal product market fit and it pulls the business along. If you have a great founder and product market fit, you're good. If you have phenomenal product market fit and an okay founder with a team that can execute, I'd also take that as well.
No way. Yeah, I killed my monosyllabic answer would have been founder. But if I can't say founder, I'll give an aspect of founder, which is actually somewhat related, that I call problem founder fit. And just quickly for somebody who wouldn't know what that is, if you are a farmer and you experience some problem in your daily activities of farming, you want to solve that, not because you think you're going to become a billionaire, because you can't sleep at night. And the reason why that's important is that for the founders that Google, what are farming problems I could solve and become a unicorn, they're going to pull the ejection handle the second that they go from the hills to the trough. And you hit way more and way deeper troughs than you do hills. So that's really important. Also, a point of clarification around this, it's problem founder fit, not solution founder fit. If you find a founder that is way too overweight on their solution that they think they've discovered, oh, I know what's right, the market's wrong, the market's going to have a different story and you're probably going to lose. So I guess you could say humility, but that's a very different thing. So problem founder fit.
Daniel, do you have an unspoken word?
No, it's impossible to be the last one. 1000% agree with my colleagues. I love this phrase of, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So I 100% agree. And I would say, just to summarize, my 3 points would be like team, market, and product. That's it. So amazing team, big market with a problem, and good product that fits the market. That's it.
All right. Boa noite. Obrigada. Thank you, everyone. I studied 1 year of Portuguese.